I want to start in Ohio with Robb Jarvis. Robb Jarvis is challenging for Ohio's 15th, and this is a guy who is the real thing. He's been a member of 3 unions. He's a former mental health care worker and a teacher. I love teachers because they get a real sense of a couple of things. One is a wage that's obscenely low. But that is how Americans, real Americans, make ends meet. And they also get a window, I think, on a part of the culture that generally politicians are disconnected from. Those young people and people of all ages who populate their classrooms. So, Robb, welcome to Rebel Headquarters.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
You, as I've mentioned, are facing sort of an interesting challenge there. First, give us the political landscape, and then I want to get into your message, which is a very strong one. And as I say, it really has its roots in your authentic life experience. But what's the political landscape there in Ohio?
Well, the 15th, as you probably know, is gerrymandered like most of the districts in Ohio. And so you're facing a map that's essentially rigged against you. But we believe that our message is one that transcends the party lines. So when we talk about things like healthcare, and when we talk about getting big money out of government, and when we talk about creating jobs, those are issues that if you stay on the issues, people respond regardless of their party affiliation. So that's the landscape, and that's the strategy, is to stay on the issues.
Your challenger, Rick Neal, he's been a pretty effective fundraiser thus far. And unfortunately, and we, of course, hate the fact that money is such a big part of politics, but getting the message out and getting media and even the grassroots effort beyond volunteerism does involve money. What's the story on that?
Well, we've raised enough. We've raised thousands of dollars. We've raised enough to file with the FEC. And really, for us, 2018 has been this perfect storm. You have so many grassroots groups that have risen up. And because of their arrival, a candidate like myself and a grassroots campaign like ours has been able to get our message out across 12 counties in a very large district. So because these grassroots groups were looking for grassroots candidates, it was sort of a match made in heaven. We've been able to do a lot while asking for very little.
You know, you're a big advocate when it comes to the opioid crisis. I know that you have some creative ideas, and you can see how it's ravaging, I would think, so much of your potential constituency there in Ohio, and nationwide for that matter. But I'm just saying that where you are, you actually do see it. How responsive have people been to that message? In other words, does the electorate spark to that opioid message?
They do. They all seem to appreciate that this is a crisis. Now, before I became a high school teacher, I worked for 4 years in the mental health field. And so I worked with families and individuals who were suffering from substance abuse. So it's kind of interesting when people talk about the opioid crisis as if it just showed up in the last year and a half. You know, I was in people's living rooms a decade ago while they were confessing to me that they had a substance abuse problem. So for us down here in Ohio and all throughout the Ohio Valley, we've seen this as a problem for a very long time. And I am grateful that it has finally hit the nationwide media.
This guy, Steve Stivers, who you're up against, the Republican who's the incumbent, he's one of the guys targeted by the DCCC for potential flippage. You know, and I'm wondering in this situation, what motivated you to step forward and enter what is a pretty tough political arena?
Well, I tell you, for our campaign, the issues have sort of come at just the right time for someone like myself to run. You know, I'm a strong union supporter, and you have attacks on unions. The Janus case is in the Supreme Court right now. You know, we have this opioid crisis. I used to work in the mental health field dealing with the opioid crisis just about every day. And as far as creating jobs, I'm in a district where we've lost a lot of jobs to outsourcing. And so to see things like this tax overhaul, which essentially rewarded corporations that outsourced our jobs in the first place, it really motivated me to get involved and to get active in a way that I think most people want to be right now.
You, as I mentioned, are someone who's been a teacher, and I also sort of mentioned the barely living wage that we give teachers. Give us some sense of how that's informed your experience and your message.
Well, I spent my first year teaching in the inner city in Columbus, and so I saw right off the bat how damaging for-profit charter schools can be to what I believe is a public good, education. And one of the things that was so awful for the charter school teachers is that they absolutely pay next to nothing. So when we talk about public school teachers not making much money, those in the charter system, it's even worse. And so you have this constant turnover, and there's no consistency for the students and the young people because the pay is so bad. You have half the staff up and leaving every month or two. And I was fortunate. I developed a strong enough relationship with my students to where, I stayed the whole year. I commuted an hour and a half just to get there every day. But for many people, the wages for teachers are just so low. And that's why you're seeing these strikes in these other states like West Virginia and in Oklahoma, and you're seeing it in Kentucky as well. It's too low, and they're asking so much because what teachers provide for this nation is really what I believe education, and public education is the shield that protects democracy.
I mentioned it in your intro, but Robb Jarvis, I love just how real you are when it comes to these messages. These are just not talking points. You just mentioned the fact that you commuted that hour and a half to get to this arguably below living wage job as a teacher. So let me get this straight then. Having had experience in the charter system, you really want to redirect monies and public support toward the public school system.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And now that I'm a member of the largest union in America, the National Education Association, and I teach in a public school now, and I have for the last 3 years, I've seen the difference between, what happens when you teach in a public school as opposed to what happens when you teach in a charter school. I remember seeing, just carts filled with computer tablets in the charter school that were meant for kids that were never given out to the kids. I mean, just unbelievable things where you just think these poor students and these poor families, they are absolutely being scammed. And the public schools, who should be getting those funds in order to make their system stronger, they are being handicapped by the money that's being siphoned off by for-profit charter schools. And it's really damaging for the families and for the kids.
You have a Nobody Rides Alone initiative, which is something unique to you. I haven't seen it anywhere else. That might just be a failing on my part, but I really I see a lot when it comes to things and that are associated with plans and inventive political messages, as well as important political messages that have an inventiveness to it. But I literally never seen this. So the Nobody Rides Alone initiative has to do with law enforcement.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that we've seen over the last few years with unnecessary fatalities and interactions with police has led me to come up with this, what I call the Nobody Rides Alone initiative. And essentially what you would be doing is increasing funds in the Justice Department meant to go to a very specific grant called the Edward Byrne Memorial Grant. It's a justice assistant grant, and it's the only federal grant that can allow for hiring more officers at the state and local level. Now, I believe that if you have a police car where no one is alone anymore, then you immediately reduce the stress of a situation in interaction between law enforcement and the community. But not simply just for hiring more officers in order to reduce that stress level, but I also believe that you can use that grant to incentivize community policing. I heard someone say once that the worst thing that ever happened to law enforcement was putting air conditioning in the police cruisers. So instead of an officer out there walking the beat, they were sitting in a car with the windows up and 10 magazines strapped to themselves and an AR-15 sitting in the car. No kid wants to come up and talk to the police officer when it's like that. So if we reward community policing, we reward and incentivize departments who get out there and are a part of the community, maybe we can stop some of this violence and some of this fear that we have and the disconnect between law enforcement and their communities.
We only have a couple of minutes left. I think even just about a minute left. But
okay.
the one, which is just a classic political. When you're running for office, you always get this. Yeah. Can you give us your essential message, but do it in 11 seconds?
Sure.
We have a minute left. I just wanted to give you one last moment to talk to the electorate.
Thank you. Well, our slogan is single payer healthcare, people over corporations, and jobs for today and tomorrow. We need a healthcare system that already other countries have, some form of universal healthcare, so that we can end job lock in America, so that people are no longer stuck in jobs that they hate, because of health insurance they can't afford to lose. We need to end the corporate takeover of our American democracy. I support Move to Amend, which will essentially give Bill of Rights back to the people and not to the multinational corporations. And we need to defend our unions and organized labor. We need to allow for free in-state college tuition in exchange for community service, and do all that we can to invest in the technologies of the future like green energy so that we can have jobs not only for today, but for generations.
Robb, it's
Sorry,
been a pleasure to yeah, that's right. And that's how the fundraising has to be to keep the lights on there for Robb Jarvis.
You got to keep the lights on. That's right.
Robb Jarvis, thank you for joining us. If you want to support Robb Jarvis or just more information on Robb's campaign, RobbJarvisForCongress.com. There's also a donation link there, as you can see, and a volunteer link. And Robb, as I said, is the real thing, not just talking points. A real message based in authenticity. And thanks for being with us today, Robb Jarvis.
Thank you very much.